acceptable in thy sight. For you are truly our rock and our redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
I was influenced this week in a larger sense about the events in Ferguson in particular. And not the specifics, but the overall message that those events sent in. And so I want to preach this morning with that in mind from 2 Samuel, chapter 18, I think 4. I'm going to be cutting across the field, as Pastor Stewart said, but just follow with me. It'll be all right. Yeah. So it's 4 and 5, 9 through 15, and 31 through 33. I'm just jumping all over it. It's 2 Samuel, chapter 18, 4 and 5, 9 through 15, and 31 through 33. I think it has something that it can say to us this morning. Beginning with verse 4, the king said to them, "Whatever seems best to you I will do." The king stood at the side of the gate, while all the army marched out by hundreds and by thousands. The king ordered Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, saying, "Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom." And all the people heard when the king gave orders to all the commanders concerning Absalom. Now let's move down to verse 9 through 15. Absalom happened to meet the servants of David. Absalom was riding on his mule, and the mule went under thick branches of a great oak. His head caught fast in the oak, and he was left hanging between heaven and earth, while the mule he was riding went on. A man saw it and told Joab, "I saw Absalom hanging in an oak." Joab said to the man who told him, "What? You saw him? Why did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have been glad to give you 10 pieces of silver and a belt." But the man said to Joab, "Even if I felt in my hand the weight of 1,000 pieces of silver, I would not raise my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king commanded you, Abishai, and Ittai, saying, 'For my sake, protect the young man Absalom.' On the other hand, if I had dealt treacherously against his life, and there's nothing hidden from the king, then you yourself will stand aloof." Joab said, "I will not waste time with you." He took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them into the heart of Absalom while he was still alive in the oak. And 10 young men, Joab's armor bearers, surrounded Absalom and struck him and killed him. And then over to verse 31. Then the Cushite came. The Cushite said, "Good tidings, my lord, the king. For the Lord has vindicated you this day, delivering you from the power of all who rose up against you." The king said to the Cushite, "Is it well with the young man Absalom?" The Cushite answered, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up to do you harm be like that young man." The king was deeply moved as he went up to the chambers over the gate and wept. And he said, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son, would I have died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." Theme this morning, very simply, deal gently. Deal gently. The text reveals David helplessly grieving over his third-born son, Absalom, who has been murdered by the authorities against David's wishes. carries with it a heavier burden. It violates the natural order that society has constructed. No parent wants to bury their child.
Come on.
Regardless of the circumstances, the loss of a child cuts through every emotional fiber within one's soul. In David's case, the death of Absalom marks the second child David has lost, related to the events chronicled in chapter 18. Absalom had a sister named Tamar. Absalom's half-brother Amnon raped Tamar. While David was greatly angered by Amnon's violation of his sister, he would not punish his son. As a result, Absalom engaged in a hatred for his brother for 2 full years because of what he had done to his sister. Absalom spent 2 years letting his hatred for his brother control his life. 24 months contemplating how best to avenge his sister Tamar. 104 weeks dedicated to his brother's action and his father's lack of action. 730 days designing the foolproof trap. 8,760 hours waiting for just the right opportunity. Anyone here know somebody like Absalom? So consumed with the past, they're unable to live in the present or look to the future. You know, whether it's revealing something else that the present has you stuck in an arrested development and you can't move forward. You're in an Absalom condition. Mean-spirited and cold-hearted with folk in the present because of what somebody did to you in the past. And wonder why you don't have any peace in your life. That's Absalom condition. By deceiving his father David, Absalom had his brother Amnon murdered. And this ultimately led to Absalom planning a coup d'etat against his father. So not only has he murdered his brother, but you know what? I can do it, Daddy. I'm going to take that over too. But Absalom did not quite have the military might he first believed and was defeated by David's armed forces. As the old blues song puts it, Absalom was too smart too soon and too wise too late. As Absalom fled on his mule, his head got caught under the thick branches of a large oak tree. He was left hanging in midair while the mule he was riding kept going. When one of Joab's men saw Absalom hanging the fences, he reported the news to General Joab. And upon hearing the news, Joab took immediate and decisive action by striking Absalom with 3 spears as he hung defenseless and unarmed. Meanwhile, David, anxiously awaiting as a father first and as a king second, asked the Cushite messenger, "Is it well with the young man Absalom?" And when David received the tragic news that his third-born son had been murdered, the text says the king was deeply moved as he wept. "Oh, Absalom, my son, would I have died instead of you?" David's grief for his son Absalom is reminiscent of many black mothers and fathers this morning. Is it well with our young black boys? Is it well with our black girls? How many times has the Cushite messenger brought the tragic news of death to a black family this year? How many times, how many of our young sons and daughters are hung up in trees waiting for the Joabs of the world to mercilessly strike them down? Thinking of Absalom hanging in that large oak tree reminds me of what Billie Holiday used to call strange fruit. People of color in particular are all too familiar with the idea of our sons and daughters hanging from where they hang, all they can see is despair. They're caught up in trees and all they can see is hopelessness. They're caught up in trees and all they can see is no one takes time to affirm their humanity. Then we get upset because they make up their own rules. There ought to be some weeping as we see too many of our future fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, leaders dying to racism, dying to drugs, dying to alcohol, dying to black-on-black crime, dying to gangs, dying to parental neglect, dying to educational neglect, dying to low or no values, dying to internal and external destruction. Let's not forget, this chapter began by David ordering his commanders to deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear deal gently, I don't think anybody's going to get murdered.
Come on now.
And dealing gently is not some passive milquetoast response, but rather a response that always maintains an eye on the other as well as our own humanity. Sadly, it's probably easier to describe what dealing gently does not look like than describe what it does look like.
Come on now.
See, Joab didn't deal gently with Absalom. See, dealing gently is not killing Oscar Grant. Dealing gently is not killing Trayvon Martin. Dealing gently is not killing Jordan Davis. It's not killing Emmett Till. It's not killing Michael Brown.
Come on.
No, see, nor does it look like the tragic aftermath in Ferguson, Missouri, where they got a curfew and they got tear gas and violence. That's not dealing gently.
No.
We as a nation has transmuted dealing gently with being weak. And when it's dealing gently is the most courageous act you can do. Because dealing gently is there something to engage in people. But behind David's compassionate plea, there are 3 lessons that can help us unpack this concept of dealing gently that I want to share with you this morning. Lesson number 1. If we must ask the Joabs of the world to deal gently, already something wrong. In verse 5, David ordered Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, saying, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. Perhaps David's order was directed at individuals incapable of carrying out such a request. This would be especially true in Joab's case. See, David said, deal gently. Well, what did that mean to Joab? The scriptures tell us that Joab was a great military leader. The scriptures tell us that Joab was a mastermind behind the conquest of Jerusalem. The scriptures tell us that Joab